Alright guys, now onto the big drawer that's going to come out the back of the car. Now you've noticed I've already gone ahead and welded up a big metal frame. I didn't really get to catch much of that on camera purely because the van was quite delayed with COVID, so I did really have to start making it before the van came. Now you'll notice the metal frame I've chosen to do is purely for strength. I'm going to be loading a lot of weight in and out of it every day with my tools, so I wanted something nice and strong. Now there's nothing wrong with using ply like you guys might want to use. It's really just personal preference. Now you'll notice there's a small drawer that's already inside the big frame for the drawer, and that's a little drawer that's just going to come out the bottom for all my hand tools and stuff for work. Now you'll notice this blue piece of metal that's on the side. Now this is how my drawer system's going to work, and there's a few different ways you can do your drawer system. You can go out and buy a heavy duty drawer runner. It's going to cost you somewhere between $300 to $400 Australian dollars. Now I highly recommend having a go at this. I think it's something you guys can replicate quite easy at home, and I'm going to show you how it works. So this piece is my drawer runner, and then on the wall, the frame of the drawer, which is going to sit in between, is this piece here. Now you'll notice these 6 bearings. There's 4 along the bottom and there's 2 at the top here. Now how I marked those out was I've ruled these all in a straight line, which is I've come up off the bottom of this, the same distance from the bottom of this runner to the bottom of the drawer frame, with just a little bit extra for clearance. So I went through and drilled all those out. I then sat the piece of metal, just like this one, in here, and I held the washer against it, putting the drill through the middle of the washer, making it a nice tight fit, which is what you want, otherwise you're going to get a lot of rattling from your drawer. Now what I did was I went and routed in a whole bunch of these big square washers, and that was really just to spread the load over a bigger surface area. And between that washer and the ball bearing is 2 more washers, and that is really just to move the ball bearing out so it sits more in the middle of this roller piece. Now I'll show you how that works, guys, with this piece here. It simply sits in there, and that allows it to slide in and out quite easily with very little effort. It's going to make it a really nice smooth drawer system that really works quite well, and it's a quarter of the price to a heavy duty runner. Now all we got to do is cut the filling pieces of ply for this, paint it all up, and we're all ready to install it. So let's go ahead with that. Alright guys, so we just finished installing all the buttons on the internal of the van, all ready for cladding. But before we do that, we've got to install this drawer. Now we've just given it a first coat of paint last night, so it's all ready. We've just assembled it properly, and we can do a second coat once it's on the van. So why don't we jump to the back of the van and install this. Alright, so I just finished installing the last rivet nut on the walls of the van. So I've got one here, and 2 at the back of the van, and they're going to be for 2 metal braces that are going across the top of the drawer. Now that's not only to brace the walls of the drawer system, but it's also to stop the drawer being able to lift up and down, as it's going to act a little bit like a seesaw on that back point there. So I'm going to go ahead, bring in the walls of the van, and we'll start installing that. Alright guys, so we just brought the frame of the drawer in, and we put across these metal bars and it bolted them into the rivet nuts that we were just talking about earlier. Now that's not only going to help support the bed, but it's also going to hold this frame in nice and straight and square. So once we fit the drawer, it's all done, which is actually a pretty exciting moment for me with the van, because it means I can take all my stuff out of my old van and put it in here and start using this every day. So it's quite the milestone for me, which is pretty exciting to see after all the work we've done so far. So let's go ahead and fit the drawer and we'll go from there. we have a drawer. How good. So that's sliding in and out really nicely now. So that's all ready to be filled up with the tools. Alright guys, so we just marked out the frame for the roller drawer to sit on for the kitchen. We marked that out the same as the last drawer. We just used the piece of metal that's going to be the runner, and we placed that on there. We put the ball bearing on the end of our 10mm drill bit, and we've just held that against the metal. That ensuring that our spacing for our runner is just really nice and tight. That way we're not going to have any rattling as we're driving down the road. So we're just going to go ahead and put all our ball bearings on and make sure it all fits nicely. Alright guys, so there you have it. The first frame side done, and you can see the runner just slides through there really nice and quite easily. So we'll just go ahead and finish those up. Alright, so that's it. So don't worry about these metal washers that are hanging out. We're just going to cut them off with a grinder. We were just trying to get as much surface area covered as possible with that washer, and I think we've got enough. So we're going to go ahead and weld up the metal frame that's going to slide between them. That way we know exactly how wide to separate these by. Alright, so we're going to have to make a cover panel for the back drawer to hide all the metal frame that was showing at the moment. And an idea that I had early on in the design was to recycle some old hardwood and create a really nice feature panel out of that. And so I found an old fence that wasn't being used anymore, and the palings off that were actually hardwood. So I was able to put them through a table saw and rip them into 3mm sections. We then glued them down in a herringbone pattern onto this piece of ply yesterday. And put some weight on it overnight, and it's actually come up pretty nice. I then made this picture frame to go on that, to go around that as a bit of a border piece, and it's also going to cover the gaps in between this panel and the panels on the side of the drawer, and it's going to stop the drawer coming in too far as well. So we're going to paint this one up white, and we're probably going to do a whitewash over this. And so all I did was when we were making this section up, we actually made it so the pieces were hanging out a little bit too long on purpose. That giving us a little bit of freedom once I made up the picture frame section to then get it the right size. And all I did then was sit this on top of it where I wanted it, and to trace around the inside, I was then able to set my saw to the depth of the veneer that we put on and cut through, just leaving the ply left. We then chiseled off all around the edges, creating a perfect frame for this to sit in. And it's actually come up really nice. So it's going to look really cool once we get some paint on it. So we'll paint that up today, and then we can get to installing. All right, so we painted all the parts for the drawers up yesterday afternoon, and they've dried overnight, and I'm really actually quite excited to show you guys the back panel for the big drawer. So we did the whitewash that we talked about over the hardwood, and then we painted this frame white, and I just think it's turned out incredible. I'm so stoked with it. It's amazing how when you're building a van, you kind of get a little bit over it sometimes. You're a bit worn down from long days working on it. And then little things like this come through, and it really just lights a fire inside of you again to keep going. So you can see all the frames behind me for this kitchen sliding drawer out the side door. So today we're going to go through and install all those. With this one, we're actually going to have to cut it in half, because you'll remember there's that little drawer that slides out underneath the big drawer. So it is actually going to be 2 panels, but we're just going to have a really small gap, and it should be quite fine. So let's get into it. So now it's time to install our last sliding system, and this one's for the kitchen like we talked about earlier. Now I've just gone ahead and installed some right angled metal brackets on this. That'll just give us something to bolt down into the floor with, making sure that this can't lift up like it's going to want to as we pull the drawer out. So before you guys drill through your floor, you're going to want to make sure there's nothing underneath that you're going to be drilling into and causing damage. And then apart from that, we're just going to use these 2 columns to make it parallel. That way when it slides out, it's going to look really nice. And we'll just screw the front off, as this is the main part we need to fix down. So when we bolt through the floor, we're just going to put some sealant around all the holes so no water can come up through the bottom. And that's pretty much it. So let's get into it. All right guys, so there you have it. We got the back bolted off and the front screwed off, and that's all good. And that works really nicely. We just pull the latch here and it slides out quite easily, and it's really nice and strong. One thing to note is that I did actually put candle wax on the sides of the metal and on the sides of the timber on both the back and the front drawer. That just making it nice and easy to slide against each other. So that's all ready for kitchen cabinetry. So there you have it, a nice easy drawer system on a budget. So don't forget guys, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you on the next episode.